Hello and welcome to the Andrew Ferris Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the show. Today I'm going to talk about agency pricing. This is an issue about which people have very strong opinions, including yours truly. Actually, I would say my opinion is not that strong here, but it's pretty strong. I have a clear preference for how agencies price their services as somebody who has been on the brand side, the agency side as a strategist, and then the aggregator brand side, and now on the agency side as an owner of an agency or something like an agency, a very, very small agency. And so I've seen it from every angle. I've seen a lot of structures happen, and I have a clear preference. And I want to tell you why I think percentage of ad spend is the best model for most e-commerce businesses to use to price their agency. I will explain and defend in just a minute. Let's jump in. First, I should say, if you're watching this on YouTube or on Spotify, which now I'm uploading video podcasts to as well, at least big shout out and huge thanks to my friends at Pretty Boy at yoprettyboy.com, who were so kind as to send me this hat because they said they were listening to Ben and Kevin from Pretty Boy, said that they were watching my podcast, saw that I was wearing a hat most times. And so they sent me along a hat as a way of saying thanks for this. This is not me being thirsty for more hats. I have plenty of hats, but it was a very kind gesture. And I appreciate it. So go check out Pretty Boy if you need some skincare for active men. Up and coming skincare brand. Really cool. They're doing some really cool stuff, actually. So go check out yoprettyboy.com. Thanks, Ben and Kevin. Appreciate it. All right, let me get into it for real. So agency pricing. This is, as I said in the intro, a big conversation point for a lot of people. I see Twitter threads often blow up and e-commerce fuel forum threads often blow up with this question: how do you price an agency best? And I have come to a conclusion about this. And as I said in the intro, my favorite model of agency pricing is to price an agency to be priced on percentage of ad spend. That is, the more the agency spends, the more you pay them. All right. And I'm going to defend that in a couple of different ways. And some of you are already watching, listening, and screaming and going, that's a perverse incentive. That's a perverse incentive. You're just telling people to spend. They're going to spend all my money, etc. And so I will get to that critique because I know it. So just know it's coming, that I'm going to address that critique. It's the most obvious problem with it. But let me say at the front end, I actually think flat fee pricing makes a lot of sense as well, particularly for larger brands. And as I will explain in a bit, my own agency pricing actually becomes a flat fee at some point and is capped. So percentage of spend, I think, is ideal for a large stage of businesses, though at some point your business gets big enough to where a flat retainer makes the most sense. You may create some bonus structures. In this way, your agency pricing at a later stage, I'm thinking like sort of 30 million plus in revenue, somewhere in there, right? Give or take. Your agency pricing at that point can function more like an employee where you've got a salary plus a bonus potential, basically. In fact, in general, agency pricing, I think in some ways ought to reflect similar thinking to employees, at least in some elements. But that flat fee notion, I think, works at some point really well. Just a straight up retainer. It's nice on the agency side too. And by the way, if you are on the brand side, you actually do want a structure that your agency likes. One of the worst things brands do in dealing with agencies is they try to stack the deck too much in their own favor and squeeze pennies out and those sorts of things. And what that's going to do is going to be to make it so that your agency doesn't like you very much and they don't care as much about your business unless you're just paying them tons of money. But you want to treat your agency well because they're a really important partner in your e-commerce business if you're working with an agency. And it's not a great idea to just try to make the deal as good as possible for you. You want them to succeed. You want them to make money from you. You want them to have margin on you. You really do. So that way you will be a valuable client to them and they will give you their best services. That's not always easy for an agency to deliver on, but that's certainly something they will try to do. I've seen this over and over when they like you and when you work hard to make it so that it works for both businesses and that when your business grows, their business grows, etc. That's what a real partnership looks like, and just keep that in mind. Now, of course, you should advocate for your business where you need to as well, but I wanted to state that up front. So I'm thinking really here of agency pricing from brands that are sort of 2 to 3 million in revenue up to about 30 million in revenue. Before 2 to 3 million in revenue, you should not hire an agency. Let me just say that up front as well. You should instead learn meta ads yourself. And I would say in D2C, if you're planning to grow with ads at all, if that's going to be a core part of your growth strategy, before you hire an agency, before you pay an agency, you should learn the basics of meta ads yourself, because if that's going to be a core part of your growth strategy, you are going to need to manage either an employee or an agency at some point who does this for you. And you will be really helped if you can do a good job learning your way around around the best practices for meta ads. Plus, at sort of under $2 or $3 million, unless you have external capitalization, you just are not going to be able to afford agency pricing. It's just unrealistic for you to be able to do that in a way that makes sense for the agency. And if you can't pay an agency, at least a few $1,000s a month, depending on what kind of agency or a freelancer they are, and really probably $5,000 a month, that's the bottom of my fees, then you shouldn't be thinking about working with an agency at all, because it's just not, you're not going to be valuable enough to them. They're not going to have enough margin, etc. You get the idea. You should, at that stage of business, this is something I counsel people to do regularly, do that. So I'm really thinking that sort of $3 to $30 million, we'll just kind of make that the range, that zone of growth that you should be thinking about. So how should you price there? As I said, I think the answer is percentage of ad spend. And the core reason why that I think that is that percentage of ad spend both scales with your revenue and costs in your stage of business that you're in. Like if you're at 3 million, you cannot afford to pay an agency what you can afford to pay them at 10 million and what you can afford to pay them at 30 million. So you can attract good quality talent, a good quality agency or good quality freelancer or whatever, by incentivizing them that, hey, look, if you can grow my business for me in a way that is profitable or that meets my business's goals, you will get increasing value from my business. And that kind of partner who can actually help you go from 3 million to 30 million or whatever along that journey, right? That kind of partner is invaluable to you. You should want to keep them. They're so valuable to your business. It's just crazy. And so you should want them to be incentivized to get you there, because if they can grow your business that much, then the value, your enterprise value as the shareholder in the business, is just significantly, significantly higher. It really matters that you can have somebody who gets you there. And there are lots of bad agencies who struggle with that. There are lots of good agencies who could do a great job. And so finding that partner who can do that for you is worth paying for and worth incentivizing to get there, okay? So in the early stage, especially, you don't have probably the money to really pay them what they are worth a lot of times, but they may be able to then see the value of your business and want to grow with you as your revenue grows along the performance that they create. So put more simply than all of that, spend is a great proxy for performance. That's what I really think. And this is the thing that people are very confused about. The total ad spend in any channel is a very good proxy for performance. If you are spending a bunch of money, okay? If you are spending a bunch of money on ads and you are not producing value in your bank account, then your ads are not actually performing and you should spend less dollars, okay? But if you are producing money in your bank account, like you don't even really need not only like a third-party attribution tool, you don't even need Meta's ads manager to, and by the way, I'm thinking of Meta first and foremost here as usual, but you don't even need Meta's dashboard to tell you whether or not the ads are working. If your account is growing as you spend more, if your bank account is growing as you spend more, or if your EBITDA is growing as you spend more, sometimes that's not always the same as your bank account number going up, then your ads are working. Again, within reason, obviously, if you have TikToks go viral every day and you're spending, maybe there's some tricky thing there, but you see what I'm saying? Basically, if that's a core part of your growth strategy, then as you spend more, then you will generate more revenue and therefore spend. And if you're not generating more revenue, you will spend less. And therefore spend is a great proxy for your ad performance. And for that reason, I think it works very well as a simple incentive to pay somebody on. If they can grow your spend, it's because the performance is coming with it. And if they cannot grow your spend, it's because the performance is not coming with it. And it's that simple. All right. It also, by the way, tags nicely to two other things. It's a good proxy for inventory issues. So this happens if you are on the agency side and you're listening to this, the freelance side, and you decided to price yourself on percentage of spend. And let's say you smash for brands doing 3 million and you're going to get to 15 or 20 or whatever pretty fast. If that's growing really fast, hey, fantastic. But you know what? They are not going to be forecasted with enough inventory to grow that fast in most cases. And therefore your spend will not be able to go up as fast as you would like it to. That's okay. That's normal. That's part of what you signed up for, to work with a growing business. And you should know it's what you signed up for if you're on the agency side. And on the brand side, the speed at which you grow along those lines now is going to be the speed at which you pay your agency more and more and more. And you will not pay them faster than you can have the inventory to support the spend, if that makes sense. And so it tags along nicely to that. And further, seasonality, right? It really, I'll come back to this in a minute, but But if you're a highly seasonal brand and your spend is going to be way higher in November and December, for example, than in, August or something, then you as a business are also going to have more money to pay after those moments. And so if rather than paying a flat monthly fee where it's going to be really expensive for you in August and really cheap for you in November, instead, it's going to be easier to plan your cash movement in your business if your agency fees are tagged to your spend along with your seasonality. And so that's sort of a convenience for both businesses. All right. And everybody can plan accordingly for those moments. So that's ultimately the point. So you might ask at that point, if spend is a good proxy for performance, well, in that case, if performance is the goal and incentivizing according to performance, and I'm going to come back to some other reasons I like percentage of spend in a minute. But if that's the point, why not just use revenue or ROAS as what somebody gets compensated on? And the answer is, I actually think that neither of those is as good of a proxy for performance as spend is. And that sounds a little crazy, but here's the issue. Revenue is burdensome. So I've seen some people suggest, hey, I'll pay you 3% of my revenue for forever, if you keep growing with me. And forget the forever part, but all you've done now is introduced a variable cost that a brand cannot get out from under, and they are going to be bitter about that 3% for forever. They're going to hate that 3% at some point. They need economies of scale in their business. And yes, the agency fees are part of it. And there needs to be a way for there to be clear moments where they can reduce percentage variable costs against their business. And so if you have some percentage of revenue forever, it will frustrate you so much. And also, revenue immediately creates all kinds of other challenges, right? Because what happens if the business adds a major retail partner? Or what about Amazon or something like that? Does the agency get credit for sales on those channels? Well, you say, okay, no, just online store only. Good point, Andrew. You don't want to do that, just online store only. But wait a minute. I know for a fact that my ad spend is affecting your Amazon channel. So why shouldn't I get credit for that, right? It's simpler to just do percentage of spend because you will spend according to the performance. And that leads to another thing. This is the reason why ROAS doesn't work, because two things. First of all, your goals change all the time. So revenue and ROAS goals actually constantly change, okay? And so you might say, yes, as long as you keep me above a 2 ROAS, that works for us, right? Well, okay, but what happens when you change products and you get a bunch more margin and everybody decides, you know what, we'll take a 1.7, we'll take a 1.5, and we're going to win on the LTV. We'll take a 1.5 and we're going to count some Amazon halo effect, etc. Now do you have to go rebuild the contract based on all those things? No. Spend, you just changed your ROAS target and then spend more, and look, boom, now your spend covers any changes in the incentive along the way. All right? So ROAS changes, plus ROAS is an attribution problem. And of course, there's that challenge as well. ROAS, according to what? According to meta ads? According to Triple Whale? According to who knows? So instead, again, spend will go up if the brand is performing, and it will go down if the brand is not performing. And it's that simple. It really is that simple. And spend, therefore, works really nicely. I can't think of a scenario, well, I can think of one, but I can't think of very many scenarios besides one where spend doesn't actually work very well as a proxy for performance. And that's really the key point here. That if in the early stage of a business, you're going to bring on an agency and you want that agency to grow with you and you want their business to do well as they go with you, and you want them to be incentivized in the right way, then ultimately spend is the best incentive structure in an agency fee. And that allows the agency to look and say, I'm willing to invest serious time and effort and maybe even dollars into a client that I think can grow a lot. I am dealing with this right now with multiple clients where I can see a pathway to growing the spend of multiple clients of mine. And it makes me sincerely motivated to win for them. The incentive works. I'm going out of my way to build processes and creative building and maybe hiring on additional talent that's going to hurt my margin in the short term, but I think will help it in the long term. To all these things to add resources so that I can grow a business faster, and therefore I can make more money off of the client, and the client will be happy about that because they will make more money if I can just grow their spend. And then I'm even helping them think financially about their total business so that as their business grows, or as their business spends, they're ready to grow effectively and produce actual contribution dollars and all those things. All right. So spend works as proxy performance, and that gets into that question of the incentive, which I said is sincerely motivating. Okay. So that's the most obvious reason to do percentage of spend, is that people like the idea of an incentive for performance, and that's great. So the incentive is reason number one that both parties tend to like it. But there's another reason why, which is that costs really do scale with spend too for an agency. So part of the reason you should pay an agency more when you spend more is that it actually costs them more to manage that. because of two things. First, a larger spend is harder to manage. It requires more attention and more detail in the ad account. The more SKUs you have and the more stuff you're spending on and the more products you're putting into the ad account, the more attention I have to pay to like, how is my bid cap sitting relative to my AOV at the level of every single ad set that I have running, right? I have to think more about planning out my spend across larger amounts. And I have to think more about all of the different creative that's moving around and be ready to analyze all kinds of creative as it launches and pay attention to what's performing and what's not and why it's performing and why it's not. So all of those things really do create more work. And what's more, creative costs go way up as you spend more. And this is the really obvious one. Whether you as a brand are sharing in the creative costs or whether the agency is paying for all of them or the agency is paying for none of them, in that case, probably the creative issue is less important if the agency is not paying for any of the creative, depending on your structure. But if you're spending more, like if I'm spending $30,000 a month versus $100,000 a month versus $300,000 a month, you just have to be able to output a whole bunch more creative to support $300,000 in spend than you do for $30,000 in spend. You do. It's a lot harder of a job. And therefore, as the costs go up with that, the agency should be incentivized along those ways or along those lines. If your business is somewhere near like 5 million in revenue, maybe even a little less, 3 million, you know the headache that inventory management, demand forecasting, warehousing, shipping, all of these things are starting to become. It is a big job at that point. If you've been running the business yourself or with a small team, you know how overwhelming it can be, especially on the demand planning side. Gosh, I've watched so many businesses go so wrong at that stage of business by getting that wrong. And I am excited to tell you that my sponsor for this episode, More Staffing, has launched a new service called More Fractional Supply Chain. It is fractional supply chain help with incredibly deep e-commerce experience. I'm talking super pros in the Philippines who have worked on a lot of e-commerce businesses. They know their way around supply chain, logistics, warehousing, shipping, all that stuff, and can bring that expertise to your business at a fraction of the cost of hiring that person in the US, but at a great price for them, which means you're going to attract great talent. It is a win-win. And you also get a special offer on working with More Fractional Supply Chain. If you use the code AJF20 to get 20% off your first 3 months of that service. I have told you a lot about what I love about More Staffing and why I think running a lean OpEx is a crucial part of running a great D2C business. I mean it. I believe it. I am staffing up my agency side of my business with my friends at More Staffing. They have been an awesome partner to me. I really love these people, and so I highly recommend their services to you. If you're staffing the supply chain, logistics side of your business, you absolutely should consider at least take a call with More Fractional Supply Chain before you go and add talent internally in any other way. So go do that by going to morenow.co to go get recruited, trained, all of those things, coached e-commerce talent around the supply chain side of the business in the Philippines. Really, really great service from really great people. Go check it out. Use the code AJF20, as I said, to get 20% off. And get supply chain help for your business at a better cost. And it is also the case that, let's say I have a brand that's spending $100,000 a month, then I not only don't need as much creative, but I'm not going to need, let's say $50,000 a month. If I'm spending 50 and I know that my performance is good so that I can probably keep scaling up, it's very unlikely that I have the inventory on hand to support that very quickly. And therefore, I'm probably going to go from 50 one month to 70 one month to 90 to 120 to 150, whatever, something like that. And my costs can scale slowly but surely along those lines. And it really is less work for me at $50,000 to output the amount of creative I need at that level of spend. And therefore, I should be paid less because I don't need to give you as much creative for that. I don't need to work as hard in terms of the management in an ongoing sense. So costs really do scale to where now, like if you go back and listen to my episode from a couple weeks ago about where I went through 8 buckets of creative, if I'm thinking about 8 different buckets of creative and building operational processes around producing all of those between me and the brand, man, that is a lot of work, and it's going to require a bunch of costs on my side. So yes, the work is harder. It's harder to manage. There's more creative involved. And so those to me are the key reasons that percentage of spend works really, really well. The incentive is motivating. The costs really do scale with the spend. And therefore, you should pay somebody more money as they spend more to manage your spend. You should pay an agency more money as they increase their spend. Okay. All right. So let's come back to the bugaboo, the big issue that's hiding out in the background that everybody's concerned about with percentage of spend, which is what about overspending? Andrew, Isn't it the case that if I pay on percentage of spend, a media buyer from the agency is just going to go ramp my spend up, even if it's not performing, because they get a percentage of spend? And my answer to that question is no. No, they are not. They're not going to do that. And there are two reasons for that, okay? The first and the most obvious reason is so simple, which is that they don't actually have an incentive to do that because you will fire them. Even if you have a long-term deal that you're locked into, you know what you will do? You will stop paying your bill and and nobody wants to, like very few people are willing to get into legal battles over unpaid bills for longer-term contracts because your party basically didn't act in the best, because an agency party didn't act in the best interest of the client. Like if somebody goes and does that, they will get fired, and probably they'll get fired by the agency before they get fired by you, before the agency gets fired by you, the brand, although you may fire them also. Like, so this is the point. The concern is a perverse incentive, and what I'm saying here is that incentive actually isn't there. It actually isn't there. The incentive that's there is for the agency to perform as well as possible for the brand. If that happens, the agency will retain clients. And let me tell you, selling and generating new business is much more expensive than retaining business for the agency. And so if the agency doesn't have that clearly figured out, yeah, it's true. Maybe they'll just sell and try to keep the biz dev train rolling and not really care if they churn clients. Well, then you found a bad agency and that sucks. But that's how life goes, because there are bad employees and there are bad agencies and there are bad vendors and there are bad partners. And that's part of the reality of business, right? But ultimately, most agencies, it is actually in their best interest. The true incentive here, and this is what I'm saying, the true incentive here is for the agency to serve the client as well as possible, and therefore for the client to win and for, in turn, the agency to win. And if they spend a whole bunch of money, you will simply go, what you'll do is you'll lock them out of the account and you will make it so that they are gone and they can't be there anymore. So they don't actually have that incentive. Secondly, what you are also suggesting, this is reason number two why I think this incentive is not actually there. That would suggest that the person is simply a low integrity person. And the fact is, no matter what part of your business you work in, you have to find people of high integrity to be partners with. What I'm saying is, whether it's because of percentage of spend or something else, finding people of integrity to work with is important no matter what. And if you find a person who just ramps up spend to try to run up their bill, that person is acting with low integrity. Even if it's subtler than that, they're still acting with low integrity, and they shouldn't be somebody you partner with. And that's the reality of the world. Some people are just low integrity people. And it's not really the incentive that's causing them to do that. It's actually just the general problem of their lower level of integrity. In fact, Jess Bachman made a great point about this in a recent Twitter conversation. He said, actually, there's an incentive no matter what structure you build. All right. So if you do percentage of revenue, there's going to be an incentive, for example, for a brand to, same thing, to spend a whole bunch of money to run up the revenue number and go from there. If you do ROAS targeting, then the incentive is going to be for an agency to figure out the most generous attribution setting possible and push you towards that and go from there, whatever, right? And if you do flat fee, fixed cost, then you have now you've created another incentive for the agency, which is to lower their costs as much as possible against that fixed fee so they can run up their margin. And so you can decide if that's what you want, somebody who is purposefully going to keep their costs as low as possible against that margin, or if you want to create an incentive for them to do that. Now, again, I actually do think like a flat fee is the best thing at a certain stage of business. And that's okay. The brand is at that, or the agency is at that point incentivized to keep their costs as low as possible against that. That might be better than the percentage of spend model at that point. But now you just have to decide which incentive you want. You actually may want to keep going with percentage of spend at that point. But yeah, the incentive is there no matter what structure you do. There is some incentive, and so you just got to pay attention to which one you care about. For me, I like the percentage of spend incentive for a long part of the business because it keeps people hungry. Okay, there are two other things I would do to protect yourself in case of the monster of the overspending agency, all right? And the first of those is to keep a short deal commitment. This is a tricky thing. Some agencies won't do this. My own clients are all month to month. That's because I'm incredibly confident in my services. Frankly, I'm not really worried that they're going to fire me. And if they do, then I will have another client at some point. And in fact, if they fire me, it's probably because it was best for their business at the time, or at least they thought they did. And at that point, my goal becomes to say, good luck to you. And that'll be okay. All right. I'm in a position where I have plenty of business, so I don't have to worry about it as much. I also don't have a huge agency with a bunch of employees. I don't have to meet much payroll. Like this is a de-risked thing for me. So I can do the month-to-month thing and not worry about it so much. Other agencies can't. But I would never be committed to an agency for much more than 3 months at a time. 6 months to a year can work if I really trust them. But I would keep that as low as possible, because then if they misbehave, you can just fire them, and you can fire them easily and get out of the contract and go from there. Secondly, and this is another crucial one that people miss out on, I would absolutely create an opt-out clause no matter what deal length you sign, an opt-out clause in your contract where you are able to get out of the contract if the agency changes who the account lead is on your account. Because highly talented people working in agencies get promoted to become managers, and they stop managing accounts themselves. They get deals with brands where they go get paid a whole bunch of money to run growth, or they go be freelancers or start their own agencies or whatever. Talented people make more money over time, and it's really hard to keep them in one spot. And you're getting the agency's institutional knowledge when you hire an agency, but you are also getting a person. I'm not saying you should definitely fire your agency if they change who the account lead is. What I'm saying is you should have an opt-out clause so that you can exit the contract whenever that happens, if it comes to that. Okay, so that's my case for percentage of spend. It's not flawless, but there is no structure that is flawless. There's nothing that will forever fully protect you from, people who are really bad at their jobs or who are just acting apart from integrity. All right. But let me tell you my structure and how I've done this for my agency so that you just understand how my own pricing works. Okay. This is what I believe is best for me. It's what I believe is best for AJF Growth. I'm including my couple of, one full-time and a couple of part-time and contractor type employees, as well as for the brand. I think this works really well for everybody. My structure is a flat fee baseline of $5,000 a month. No commitment. It's like I said, it's month to month. Flat fee baseline of $5,000 a month. So I could take on a lower revenue client, and I have done this many times, who can't afford to pay me that much, because my favorite stage of business to work in is businesses that are like around $2 to $5 million and want to get to 20 or 30 or something. That's my favorite stage of business. So I've built this contract to reflect that I want that kind of employee, or that kind of client, and go from there. All right. So baseline flat fee of $5,000 a month. This protects from me getting to a point where I get paid like $1,000 a month after doing a bunch of work, and my work is just undervalued. Okay. From there, I take 10% of the first $150,000 in ad spend. That is a revolutionary stage of business for a brand. I think you should be incentivized. I should be incentivized to make good money fast in that scenario. Often part of my own service in this case is like financial coaching for that stage of business and all kinds of general coaching. So I'm working really closely with an entrepreneur to navigate the landmines. That's really going to take you up to the, from 2 to 3 million or whatever, towards 10 million, 8 to 10, something like that, depending on a bunch of factors. If you can get above that, up to that $150,000 a month in spend and a little above that. From there, I take 5% of spend on the next $300,000 in spend. So that takes you to $450 per month. And at that point, I would be making 30 grand a month if you got to the end of that. Why a lower percentage of spend there? Because at some point, while it is more work for me to manage an ad account, as it gets there, it is not linearly more work. It is perfectly fair for me to make a lower percentage of that spend as I add on some additional creative output, as I manage some things. It actually a lot of times can scale pretty fast. And so I think I should make a little less at that point. The brand should start making more and more and should be able to really see the profits at that stage of business. At that point too, I'm just making plenty of money, frankly. I don't need to make more at that stage of things. If I'm managing $250,000 a month in spend and I'm getting 20 grand a month in a billable, like that's great. It can work really well and we can go from there. And then it's capped at that 30K amount. If I'm spending $450,000 a month, that means this brand is big. It's getting plus that 20 million, type stage of business, 30 million. At that point, we really do want to move to that fixed fee model and see if we can keep that spend there and go from there. So that's the way I've structured things, because I think it works nicely along the journey for brands. It works nicely along the journey for clients. I don't mind being public about that because it ultimately, I just think it's perfectly fine for agencies to share their pricing. And that includes all of my services. Now, the other thing I'll tell you is that if you're wondering if I am doing this as a sales pitch for you, I'm not. I'm actually not taking on more clients right now. If you're interested in working with me, I'm sort of building a wait list, but I have no plans to add clients at this stage of things. And so I'm not sharing it because I'm trying to attract your business. I'm really not. I just think it might be helpful to you to hear what somebody's pricing is as transparently as possible and to go from there. Okay, that's it. I think that's everything I have to say about this topic. Let me know if you have thoughts, because I'm curious if you think I've gotten anything wrong here and if you think I've just blown it. But that's my approach, percentage of spend as the main bulk of agency pricing. As I said, I would love to hear from you about this. If you have any agreements, disagreements, Tell me your horror stories, whatever it takes. You can, of course, reach out to me at ajfgrowth.com, or you can email me at podcast@ajfgrowth.com, or even better, tag me on Twitter and let's have this conversation in public. That's at Andrew J. Ferris. As always, please do go follow up with my incredible sponsor at More Staffing, specifically More Fractional Supply Chain. As I mentioned on this show, I think an incredible offering to go pursue supply chain services from incredible, talented professionals. If you have a growing business, you really should pursue it. Go to morenow.co. Tell them I sent you. Use the code AJF20 to get 20% off your first 3 months. And next week on the show, I have an interview that's coming. I have also another Opening the Books episode coming very soon that you're going to like. Make sure that you subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this, and I will see you next time.
And I pray it all. I know the script